Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you now, Donovan. Thanks everyone for coming.
Cool, thank you. Sorry, I just need to get with this monitor offline, I just need to get my screen sharing right. Screen sharing right. But yeah, in the meantime, thanks very much, Rhonda. And yeah, this was a first for me joining the virtual cafe, but it was really great meeting everybody in September this year, the in-person meeting. Yeah, this is essentially just something I've been thinking about for a while, just having joined OBFS, I guess more recently, and just seeing the value of the discussions that go around and just the exchanges around field station development, protocols, strategy, everything like that. I really found it such a useful community to be a part of. And yeah, one of the things I noticed was we often felt like it's just quite a different context to what a lot of field stations are in. Being within a national park and having a whole range of different jurisdictions to deal with. We're a relatively small station situated in a very large national park. So it just always felt like quite a different context to what I was used to seeing. But anyway, I have done, doing a lot more reading about this and meeting everybody in September and just seeing how many similarities actually are in stations in North America, stations in Africa. So yeah, that's just a little bit of context. My name is Donovan Tye. I'm the field station director for a field station here in Skukuza, and my power has just come back on, so I'm just going to quickly change the share here. I've been working with the organization for tropical studies for just over 10 years now, and during that time have been involved mostly in savanna systems in Kruger National Park, but have also worked in the Western Cape region of South Africa, where we set up a program which was also based in national parks, part of the same network, SANParks network, as well as a range of provincial parks out there. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun working in these areas. Obviously, fantastic areas for research and really interesting areas to work in and run programs in. But yeah, we're just going to give you a little bit of background to our experience in setting up a field station within a national park in South Africa, and really hoping to hear from everybody about different opportunities and different approaches, different strategies that have been used, and see how we can learn from everybody. And okay, I hope that is working now. So our field station we are based, as I mentioned, in Kruger National Park. It's based in a camp or a tourist area. It's also the administration headquarters for the national park. It's called Skukuza. It's essentially in the southern regions of the Kruger National Park. And just for a bit of context of where that is, it's in eastern South Africa, in the Lowveld region, so essentially an area between the Escarpment Highlands and going down to the Mozambican lowlands. It's characterized by sort of semi-arid to tropical savannas. It really is an expansion of the tropical belt coming down from East Africa. But the national park is essentially part of a broader national park network of South African national parks, which consists of 19 national parks, which is roughly 50% of the national parks in South Africa is essentially under SANParks jurisdiction. These parks, although Kruger is the biggest at about 2 million hectares, overall within the country of South Africa cover about 4 million hectares of protected area under SANParks custodian. And within the region, it's actually part of a much bigger frontier conservation area, primarily based in South Africa is the Kruger National Park section, but also extending into Mozambique, known as the Limpopo National Park, and as well into Zimbabwe through the Gonarozoa National Park, which adds another roughly 1.2 million hectares of sort of all open or connected protected areas to this network. So it's a really big conservation area to be part of. We are just down in the corner in Skukuza, but incredibly diverse landscapes across this protected area, and a lot of fun to be working out here and exposing students and running research projects across all these different landscapes. a lot of that variation is coming in just from what we're seeing in the sort of ecological template for the area. So quite a lot of variation in rainfall from north to south in the park. Generally, the northern area is characterized by drier parts, especially sort of north central regions. It's quite a dry basin of the national park. And down south, relatively wet, still moderate in terms of the range of savanna systems, but around 650 to 700 mils of rainfall down in the south, where Skukuza is located. There's also quite a nice template for variation in terms of the geology. So the western sections of the national park are dominated by these very old granitic soils. This geological range essentially is about 3.5 billion years old in terms of different exposures. So extremely old western granites, heavily eroded, very leached, relatively nutrient. The landscape and the eastern sides are dominated by these much newer basaltic layers, yielding these very fine clay soils, which really have a higher water retention capacity, and which results in quite a different landscape across the national park. And these really combined really explain a lot of the land systems that have been classified in the reserve. I'm not going to go through all these land systems, but just to give you a little bit of a feel for what these landscapes look like. In the south, in the sort of wetter areas, it's quite surprising for a lot of students who come out here who have an image of a savanna, I think very much inspired from East African savannas. And when they arrive in Skukuza and we start traveling around in these southern sections, and we go especially towards the wetter areas in Pretoriascope, and that they see what's, something almost a closed canopy forest at some stage, but it's, it's tending towards a woodland, high tree densities, sort of 60 to 80% canopy coverage. So in the regions known as bushveld, but relatively high tree densities and woody densities to what you see out in East Africa. There is quite a lot of variation driven by the geology, as I mentioned. So after you head out towards the basalts, quite a different story. Much lower tree densities, more open landscapes, more in line with what a lot of people have in mind when coming out to savanna systems. And in Skukuza, this is a photo taken just south of the station. It's slightly higher than in the wet areas, but still relatively high tree densities, relatively bushy. And this is where we do a lot of our work. It's associated with one of the research super sites in Kruger National Park, which are essentially areas which are designated as research areas where the idea is to encourage researchers to work to make data sets interchangeable and to build on from existing projects rather than repeating a lot of the same baseline surveys in different locations within the park. So yeah, that's really a lot of our backyard. In the central regions, it dries out quite a lot. A lot of that central region is dominated by these basaltic clays, and you get these very open landscapes, often with very, very few trees scattered between them. So really a lot of fun to drive through. This is where you find a lot of your big herds, animals, herds of buffaloes, zebras, wildebeest, high densities, really are attracted to these relatively nutrient-rich plains in the area. So quite a different landscape to what we have around us. In the north, quite variable. The rainfall itself is quite variable. It's also a bit more complex in terms of geology and soils in the region. On the granites on the western side, it's got a lot of high interannual variability in rainfall. So it can be characterized by very, very dry periods, low grass biomass, very infrequent fires. But during the wet years, it really does flush out a lot and can attract a lot of animals through it. The majority of the north is dominated by these Mapani woodlands. So these are the sort of species you see in the middle of the screen and on the right hand of the screen. And they can really form close to monospecific woodland and shrubland areas. A lot of the structure which is influenced by elephants and other mega herbivores in the area, as well as some of the soil compositions. But yeah, really quite a different landscape to what we work in down south. And when we have courses, especially semester courses out here, we really try and expose students to the range of different savanna systems and land unit types when we travel around the park. One of the major features of the area being a semi-arid area and high annual variation in rainfall is drought, and it plays a major role when it comes to woody species recruitment. We're just exiting a drought period right now, heading into a wetter period. But yeah, 2016, 2017 is what this image to the bottom right is essentially what large sections of the park and large sections around Skukuza look like. So quite a lot of variability. But we're entering a wetter period right now, and the park is tending to look a little bit more like you see on the right. No, sorry, top left at the moment. But these dry cycles really have a major influence in the tree grass interactions and tree grass ratios throughout the park. Another key driver or key source of variability within these landscapes, as I mentioned, incredibly old. Many of them are highly eroded and form these especially the granites, you get these gently undulating landscapes bisected by a whole range of stream orders and catchments. There are a number of major catchments that travel across the park. They're really interesting in terms of freshwater ecology and freshwater management, and especially the politics around that, because the majority of these catchments, all the major, majority of the catchments situated outside the park, travel through the park, where the emphasis of ecosystem services and the role of national parks is really emphasized, and then exit into Mozambique. So a whole range of stakeholders along these catchments, and some really interesting challenges dealing with water management throughout the park. To the north of the park, yeah, these catchments can be quite flashy, quite seasonal. Definitely, there's only one or two perennial systems, but often most of them are seasonal. The south, there's a number of perennial river systems and catchments, but really, really important in terms of the effects on distribution of mega herbivores or animals in general, mesoherbivores, especially during the dry months. So a lot of what you see in terms of landscape patterns is really driven by the availability of surface water in these regions. Another really important driver out here is fire savannas and fire-prone systems. Quite a lot of variability in the fire return period in these areas, everything from sort of 2 to 3 years down south, where you get a lot higher accumulation of grass biomass in a relatively short period, but up north, it's anything from 5 to 7 years, as depending on the rainfall period you're in. But yeah, as you can imagine, have a major influence on woody recruitment, and seen as a key driver, and together with herbivory, really do influence vegetation form and function, or in vegetation structure in the area, particularly tree grass ratios. And Kruger, throughout these different landscape units, have set up a range of long-term experiments looking at the influence of fire and herbivores. And these really form nice templates to work on for us. And some of these have been going for as long as coming up 70 years now. 1954 was when the long-term fire experiments were set up within Kruger National Park. And they've also got a range of herbivore exclosures, which range, I think the oldest one we work in about 30 years old. So yeah, really interesting to see the effects of fire and herbivory on these systems. In terms of those herbivores, Kruger's probably most renowned for its abundance and diversity of mega herbivores and mesoherbivores, and obviously the carnivores that follow them. It's got one of the highest remaining densities of rhino within Africa, and as with African elephants. African elephants are really interesting in this park. It's we've seen from going through a long period of relatively strict management of elephant numbers in terms of using population culling as a method to maintain populations at a sort of pre-described level, what was seen as a carrying capacity for Kruger National Park. So a change in policy in the mid-90s, and now we've seen elephants shift from roughly 7,000 individuals within the park to probably somewhere in the range of 25 or higher. And that's, as you can imagine, has quite a strong influence of the landscape that we've seen over the last years in terms of tree densities, and what's being recruited at the moment. So a lot of fun questions around elephants and mega herbivores in general. It's also, Kruger is also particularly well known for its high carnivore densities and diversity. Some of the highest reported densities of leopard are just along the Sabi River, very close to where the station is. So yeah, it's a lot of fun in terms of getting out there and setting up projects. And yeah, obviously a lot of really interesting ecological patterns on our doorstep. Overall, diversity across the different taxa is really high, and this really has made it an attractive destination for research over the years, and was one of the core reasons program got started within Kruger National Park. Just shifting to the station, giving you guys a bit of context here, OTS has been running field programming within Kruger National Park since about 2004, and in an effort to expand their influence on human capital development here in South Africa, and to render the course more sustainable in terms of long-term running and maximize the benefits coming from the research contributions by students on the course. There was a proposal put forward to essentially set up a partnership and a field station within Kruger National Park within Skukuza, which really does act as the administration headquarters. So it's where scientific services are based, it's where our conservation services are based, and technical services, whole range, everything really. Skukuza serves as a hub for Kruger Park management. So it was seen as an ideal location to set up a station, access to a whole range of national park personnel. Nice way to integrate research that goes on within programs with undergraduate education, graduate education, to the needs of National Park, and really a nice way for students to get hands-on experience when it comes to conservation management from researchers, scientists, and park managers who have had a range of experience in running a very large-scale national park. So the station was proposed in, these proposals probably came from 2013 for a relatively small field station, looking at a maximum capacity of 50 beds. And that will be developed over time with the strategic development plan, and officially opened in 2017 as an education center and field station here in Skukuza. So the facilities we include library facilities, lab facilities, lecture hall facilities, and a range of different accommodation facilities. The design philosophy is really being around trying to maximize and showcase sustainable design within the park. So really reusing existing resources, trying new techniques, showcasing new techniques. Not all of them have worked. Some of them have worked, but many of them work very, very well. So yeah, this is the lab facilities and the science center in general. Just to give a brief overview of the station stats or the characteristics of the station, we run with an annual operating budget probably around $80,000 a year. Number of full-time employees fluctuates quite a lot depending on when we have programs, but essentially throughout the year we're sitting at about 8 to 8.5 full-time employees based at the station. And that excludes academic staff associated with semester programming or summer program that comes and runs through OTS or our partner institutes. Associated institutes with the field station, we have 3, and they all are work together through an initiative called the Skukuza Science Leadership Initiative. The partners include Organization for Tropical Studies, South African National Parks, National Park Agency, and in Society Trust, a locally based NGO, which was essentially established to focus on human capital development in South Africa's environmental and biodiversity sector. I mentioned the establishment in early 2013, officially opened in 2017. In terms of user days, we range, I guess, fairly within the average of what I've seen for a number of field stations situated in national parks in the USA. Probably about 4,500 user days per year. I was trying to get the stats on visitors, but didn't get there in time. But probably of those, majority of those are students, and majority of those students are undergraduate students. We also have just around, I think probably the last I checked, between 100 and 150 researchers and visitors per year. Overnight capacity, we're currently still developing, but we're sitting at the moment at about 38 beds, which is a reliable overnight, which is part of our consistent overnight capacity for the station. The way the partnership has been established here in South Africa is Organization for Tropical Studies, SAMParks, and its Tiny Trust have all joined into a joint initiative called the Kruger Science Leadership Initiative, and that really was established with a key focus on providing field-based opportunities for all South African students. At a national level, we really seem to be struggling with capacity when it comes to an environmental sector. There's a number of different initiatives that have been launched at the national level to address this, and we have very much tried to align the key objectives of this initiative with those at a national level. So really focusing on providing training and education opportunities for students, from everything from high school students to university students and even professionals. We want there to be a solid output in terms of education. So the idea was to make sure that research data and publications was always at the core at a lot of the long-term, or a lot of the projects that students take part in. And yeah, essentially the station itself would be set up as a platform for exchange across both from international students, local students, everything in a range of different education levels across there. So yeah, when I was been thinking about the application, a lot of what I've come across from OBFS and just all the different ideas and approaches to field station management. As I mentioned, I always felt like it was quite a unique situation we were in terms of being in a national park, but came across this work by Michael Stevens and Gina Gilson, and this I've found a really useful framework for thinking about just some of the opportunities and challenges and strategies to deal with some of those within national parks. So yeah, I really hope that we can discuss a few of these. I can mention some of them, what we've experienced, but yeah, really hoping that we could hear from everybody else and some of the different experiences of the world. For us, some of the key opportunities that have really come out of working within a national park. I mean, it's obviously for many reasons discussed in terms of landscapes and diversity, interesting ecological patterns and access. It really is a really great venue for undergraduate education. And that was, something that OTS was able to really bring to the table in terms of sustainability for the station. We've been running undergraduate education in national parks within South Africa and in provincial parks within South Africa and small reserves and such for a number of years, and had really demonstrated how it can be of value to park management as a whole. So undergraduate education really is a fantastic venue. We've since setting up the station, we've really been able to expand on that graduate education, offering a range of new courses, a range of short courses, a range of courses directed at particular specialized courses. So really have expanded our efforts in undergraduate education, and the National Park has been a great partner for that. And really, the way the partnership works for us is that all the numbers, everything that's used by the station itself or produced by the station itself, is reported at a park level as well. Obviously, for this, it's attractive location for research. It's got a long history in research as a national park. It's especially when it comes to adaptive management in savanna systems, it's really seen as a park that was really at the forefront of some of those management strategies. And it's just a very ecologically diverse and has a very interesting template for testing ecological theories in savanna systems. So attractive location for research. So Kruger hosts an annual Savanna Science Network meeting. So it's quite well known within the Savanna Science world as an interesting place to exchange ideas and meet up with other Savanna scientists. As a field training site, having access to those locations is really interesting. It's to be able to take students to long-term experimental burn plots or to exclosures and really demonstrate in person what the influence of some of these drivers is really we found to be incredibly useful as a training aspect. It's also a nice way for students to see how research at national parks is done in terms of the whole process, everything from proposal writing, permission seeking, field access, acquisition of game guards or field guides, everything that's needed when it comes to conducting research. So it's a nice exposure to students at an relatively early part in their career to some of the realities of field research in these areas. We found that it's been useful in improving park access, especially for groups that weren't necessarily visiting the park on a regular basis. The field station offers a great base for visiting groups from primary school to high school to early career, and even many professional groups. We often get professionals who have yet to visit the park. Having the field station there, using it as a training venue, using it as workshop venue really does bring in people who haven't necessarily engaged with the national park into the national park, and exposes them to a lot of the back-end management and has really improved access that we found. Facility sharing is something that we've found as a key benefit for working within a national park. When we arrived in Skakuza, there was already a range of research facilities available, a range of research accommodations available. So having that as a backbone was incredibly beneficial for us. Since we've been able to develop the station, we've also opened those facilities up to national park employees, visiting researchers, everybody to come and use those facilities themselves, as well as Skakuza residents. So that's been a useful engagement. And what we've also found is just the incredible opportunity for collaboration. It's having national park employees is obviously, and being based there, especially scientific services, has been a really great draw card for a lot of scientists. And having that opportunity to collaborate with the scientists and bring scientists who have worked with OTS and that into the fold when it comes to park management has been another opportunity that we found really interesting. I won't go through too many of these. I just think, what some of the strategies that we've found quite interesting or quite useful have been, first of all, to use a lot of the revenue generated through facilities and for local programming and for running the station. I'll show a little bit of data on that shortly, but that was one of the conditions of us setting up a field station within a national park, is that any income generation from the facility would need to go back into environmental education objectives set by the national parks. And we essentially had very strong overlaps with those objectives, so that being able to use those incomes and support a whole range of local programming has really been a useful way for us to operate the station. As I mentioned, we do work we try and establish long-term research projects to really inform national park management. Having been able to set the station up there has really changed the game, because we've been able to revisit those field sites on a much more regular basis, opposed to just being visitors within the national park. So that's been a useful strategy for us, and we feel a very useful strategy for Kruger itself. We've got some of the longer running data sets when it comes to biodiversity data within the park, and having students come each year and reiterate that work has been a nice workforce for us, and obviously a great way to learn about biodiversity surveys in the field. Whenever possible, we try and incorporate sandbox personnel within our training programs. We've probably had over 15 or 20 personnel attend the undergraduate semester programming over the years. Many of those have gone on to carry on with graduate studies, carry on with or become full-time senior scientists within sandbox. So that's been a nice training ground for them. It's having a strategy to broaden our research, our funding pool has also been useful to us, with different institutions in the partnership being based in different geographical locations, and having different access to different funders has been useful when it comes to infrastructure development. The science center behind me was the first bit of infrastructure we developed, and it came through funding through NSF FSML program through OTS, and was co-funded by the Department of Expanded Works program here in South Africa. So that was a co-funded project which worked out really well when it comes to facility development here. And then essentially supporting emerging research ideas in the park and bringing in a variety of research groups. That's also been I think one of our more rewarding strategies, having not just environmental or biology students use the station, but really trying to make it multidisciplinary has helped us a lot. In terms of using the facilities as a revenue generation to support programming, we've really focused on developing program for local students. So prior to the establishment of the station, where a lot of the undergraduate semester program here was dominated by international students, over the years using these facilities and developing a whole range of new programming specifically aimed at local students, we really have been able to bring those ratios down to about 50-50 or up to about 50-50 right now, which is a really nice mix. It's a great opportunity for students to mix with different education systems, different cultures, and it makes it for a huge amount of fun on the programs themselves. Some of the long-term research projects which we have found or have been established in collaboration with other universities include a project called Browse, which essentially is established looking at the long-term effects of megaherbivores on vegetation structure and other taxonomic groups. So this project, I think, also started in 2013, 2014, has been running a number of years. Our program director, Lawrence Kruger, who I think is on the call, has been heavily involved in the establishment and the continuation of this project throughout its process. And perhaps afterwards, maybe give a broader overview of Browse and how it's been used to inform park management. But really just a nice example of being able to establish long-term research projects which be able to feed back into national park management. Each year we have students from a range of different universities, local institutions, collaborators in University of Florida, University of Eswatini in Swaziland, all coming out to participate in our summer or winter biodiversity surveys. So it's really been a great platform for training as well as a long-term research project in the park. The designs are set up both from excluding all herbivores as well as just excluding sort of elephants and giraffes, all set up across a range of different big tree density areas. Some of our challenges to date, and this I'd like to hear from everybody else what some of the experiences have been. Being set up in a park, we have multiple institutions involved in the stations, which means multiple jurisdictions, multiple policies, and different approaches which you need to take on. So that is always a challenge. I think what's helped us a lot is being able to set up that joint initiative beforehand. That's really, as the initiative itself has its own independent objective, that's helped us a lot. And yeah, I think suddenly realized I've been talking for way too long. So I just want to sort of end off. This is where we are sitting with an operating model, with multiple institutions all collaborating towards one field station. And questions I would like to just hear some feedback on are just around how do other partnerships in other field stations, how have some of their partnership models been set up? Are there any additional ways in which collaborations with national parks can be set up? And just I'd be really interested in hearing about other key challenges and opportunities which have been made possible by setting up field stations in national parks.
Thanks, Donovan. There's already some questions in the chat from Shane. I don't know if you can see it, but what is your research permitting process and what role do you have in that? And then how open is general research questions? We'll get to that one next.
We all the research processing is handled through scientific services. They have a research committee which reviews research applications on a quarterly basis. What we do is set up education permits for a lot of the, which cover fairly broad. It covers a lot of the work we do in terms of the programs. But when it comes to any long-term projects such as the BRAS, then it's a dedicated research program permit. What was useful with the station is being able to facilitate group visitation to the park, which would normally require a group filling out an education permit beforehand or research permit beforehand, getting all the required permissions, setting up all the game guarding, everything like that beforehand. We are able to encompass a lot of visiting groups within our existing education permits. So that's been one of the draw cards for getting institutions who generally only come for a few days at a time come to the station.
There's another question from the chat, and I see Philippe waving. I'm going to first get to Shane's question and then Philippe. So how open is the park to general research questions that may not feed directly into park management?
Fairly open. Yeah, I've attended a range of those research project meetings, and project topics are quite variable. Everything from plant traits and very species specific, relatively small scale projects, all the way to broader scale projects such as the long-term effects of fire, changes in fire regimes, such as that. And majority of them will still be accepted. So I think it's obviously beneficial if you can link it up to a current management objective or a current need, but they are still fairly open to exploration research with Kruger.
Philippe, go ahead. You can unmute. There you go.
Sure. I'm curious, do you have a formalized way in which you engage park staff and personnel going out in the field with the researchers? In a couple different field stations I've been at, that strategy often really helps pave the way to a lot of collaboration, but it's not something that is often formally integrated into the activities of field station.
Yeah, it's something, and it's something that we've really tried to improve on. I think one of our challenges which I skipped over was this communication and keeping everybody informed of what we're doing, and also the other way around is making sure that we stay in communication with scientific services here to see what the actual current needs are. So something we've changed to more recently is actually inviting a different member of scientific services in each semester or with a particular program, and actually asking them, what are the questions that really need asking? How can we help out with collecting some of the data? How can we share resources in terms of, be it pilot projects or establishing long-term projects to try and align with the actual needs. But I think it probably in the beginning it's something we didn't pay enough attention to in making sure we formally involved sandparks personnel or national park personnel in that process.
Yeah, because one of the things I've heard from national park personnel is how hard it is for them to get information from the field scientists and researchers, and so it seemed to me that one of the things to do is to just simply send them out in the field together. It's amazing how much conversation can occur that way. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, it's something we're very lucky. I mean, scientific services colleagues out here have been incredibly supportive over the year and really open to collaboration with our own scientists, our own staff, as well as the student groups we come through. So it's from a student's perspective, even from our perspective, going out in the field with the sandparks personnel was always fantastic, and just getting a lot of the context. So I think we've been quite lucky with having a relatively engaging scientific services group being in Skakuza.
Is someone trying to talk? I was going to get to the next question in the chat. Shane, were your questions answered, or did you want to follow up on any of the questions that you had asked? Did I catch Shane? Is he still here?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. No, that's fine, Donovan. Thank you. I just wanted to get a general feel because when your presentation said it's kind of things must be aligned, and I didn't know how strictly that had to be, or whether they were restrictive only to that. It's good to hear that they're open to kind of all research. But a follow-up with the permitting question is, do you get researchers that don't plan accordingly and want to try to get out, next weekend, or even within, you say their approval is every quarter. So even a month away to a researcher might be good planning, but for access to your site, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, we get it all the time. So I guess one of the workarounds has been to make the education permits themselves relatively broad in terms of the research objectives. And something that has actually made our lives a bit easier from a national park perspective is the establishment of these, what they call these research super sites. It just means there's already a wealth of data existing for these locations. And in terms of getting access to the field, the way it works in sandparks is, or in Kruger National Park, is the park is split into a range of different sections. And each of the sections is managed by a section ranger. And to get field access, you would need to submit a request to a section ranger to say, I'd like to go to this location, or I expect to be here for this in the state period. And that process is generally pretty smooth for the research super sites. So when we do get last minute requests and groups coming in and saying they would like to take a student group out to, see a river system or a fire break or something along those lines, we often direct them to the research super sites, just because it's from a last minute access point of view, it's a lot easier than getting to some of the other parts of the park. But it's something that's changed a lot for us. I mean, especially with new security concerns within the park and challenge of poaching becoming much more of a daily occurrence within the national parks, and that the section rangers posts have changed dramatically, and things that they have to worry about on a day-to-day basis are no longer just when to burn and where the research is and which patrols to do. And it's a lot more thinking about security concerns in their section. So that has been something that's changed for us a lot of the years. It's not as easy to gain access to certain field sites, especially sites which are in priority areas for rhino or elephants, or maybe on the periphery where there's a lot of incursions. So yeah, that's definitely changed a lot for us over the years.
Thanks for that. Going through the chat questions. The next one is from Breezy Jackson. Breezy, I think you're still on the call. If you want to ask it, or I can just read the question. One of the challenges in your table was perceptions about priority access. Can you elaborate on how different users are prioritized? Do you turn many applicants away?
Yeah, it's a challenge that I think even within the national park agencies, it's not always understood how a field station can be run with external organizations, and how those decisions are made about an external organization running a field station within a national park. Because we have put a lot of resources in, and we've got a range of relationships and projects registered and everything, it is perceived as priority access within the national park. So what we really focus on is facilitating it for other visiting groups, rather than being gatekeepers for research or education within the park. So that's been our strategy, to try and remove that perception. I don't know how effective it's been across the national parks employees, or but yeah, by building relationships with local institutions. So a lot of other big sending institutions and students in South Africa have been the major universities in Johannesburg and Cape Town and Grahamstown and Mpumalanga. We really are trying to support undergrad education as much as we can for those universities. It's seen as one of the things that has declined dramatically in South Africa over the last 10 years is opportunity for undergraduate students to get to the field. I think it's a lot to do with costs associated with running field courses and running university-led field stations, but definitely the opportunities for undergraduate students these days is quite different to what it was 10 years ago. So we really aim to facilitate those opportunities and provide them through the field station and supplement those opportunities in terms of running costs and personnel time and equipment resources as much as we can to try and counteract that perception of having priority access.
How long does a permit usually take? Like if someone comes in with a new and you can't fit it under the broad permit category? I know in Mexico we have some challenges around permits sometimes.
It kind of depends on how close you are to the quarterly meeting. So they do publish the dates. So if you get it in 2 weeks before, you can get a review and get a turnaround 2 weeks before, but or 2 weeks later. But yeah, it really just got to align with the meeting times for the research committee.
So, because in Mexico, you need a sponsor from Mexico to get you the permit. Does it require? I mean, is that sort of how that structure is? With this science group that meets, they decide if it's good for South Africa in the park. Yeah,
well, yeah. So they will. A lot of it is just reviewing the feasibility of a lot of the work. I mean, some of it. Sometimes it's on topics which are just a little challenging to work on, and sample size is required, and ethics required for doing some of the work is just not what the committee deems feasible. So we won't necessarily deny it, but often send feedback on those points and just say what you're proposing as a particular protocol for this is we don't see as something that's feasible within the timeframes you provided, or with the resource requirements that a project like this will take from national parks. So I think, yeah, a lot of those are the criteria they use. But I mean, a common strategy for people applying for permits out here is to really look at what the management objectives are, look at where the gaps are, and really try and highlight those as much as possible.
Gotcha.
So I think people, know the system and try to work within the balance of it.
There's another question in the chat. Sorry, Michael, I jumped in with my own question. Michael Stevens is asking, are there other field stations in South African national parks, or is yours the only one?
There are other environmental centers which are either run by SANParks directly or local government in terms of environmental centers. This is the only one I know of which has established itself as a field station, which really supports both researchers, students, professionals, workshops, everything like that. Within the provincial parks, there's a few. There's one down in KZN, which is KwaZulu-Natal, just south of where we are at the moment. There was some field stations. One of them is called Dung Beetle, and set up in Shishlui and Mfolozi National Park in KwaZulu-Natal. So there have been a few in provincial parks, but in terms of the national park network, environmental centers, but I think we might be the only one that's a field station.
Any other follow-up questions, Michael?
Yeah. The reason I asked, Donovan, is because building a cohort I think is really helpful. That was one of the upshots of that paper that Gina and I wrote. Initially, people at my own university thought that we had the only field station located in a national park, and then our national park, Capitol Reef National Park, sort of felt like we were an oddity or even an annoyance. And so the fact that we linked with other organizations that had similar relationships, there are 11 university-run field stations in U.S. national parks. And so building that cohort and then sharing opportunities and challenges has been really, really helpful. And then I really value this presentation because one thing we talked about as a group is connecting with international field stations that had that same sort of complex partnership organization.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, one of the things I really want to start working on, and as part of the international committee, is building relationships with other field stations within Africa and within national parks. I think, yeah, maybe some of the international committee's partnership programs would be really nice to do that. But yeah, I found your paper incredibly useful in terms of just thinking about just a framework for classifying all these opportunities and challenges we faced. Yeah, and as I mentioned, I always felt it was quite a different setting to what many other field stations were in, but it's great to see all the different approaches and strategies that are taken to deal with them.
And then as a follow-up, I wrote a paper kind of from the National Park Service employees perspective. So the first paper was kind of university perspectives, but then I interviewed people from our partnering organizations from those 11 national parks who also have university-run field stations within their boundaries. And I think that was really helpful to share with park employees to see how this type of relationship fit into the context of other field stations.
Okay, awesome. I must have a look at that. I haven't read that yet, but that sounds great.
I can put the link in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. We have about 5 minutes left. And I want to save the last 2 minutes, talk about the International Committee and a couple of things happening with OBFS, including the matching program that Donovan mentioned. Are there any other questions at this point for Donovan? Feel free to raise your hand or jump in.
This is Virginia. Sorry, I have a cold and I feel absolutely lousy, but Donovan, can you, I know you mentioned the 3 organizations that are involved, but whose idea was it to start this and who was the kind of force behind it? I'm curious the origin story, because I think that says a lot about the intersection between the different entities involved and their motivations.
I am going to direct, so Lawrence Kruger is our program director. He's been involved in the establishment of many of our long-term programs, and was intimately involved in the establishment of the initiative. So if Lawrence is online, yes, he is. Maybe you can field this one, Lawrence.
Good evening, everybody, and Don, thanks for a great chat there. The original agreement that was brokered through Sandparks was through the Mellon Foundation. They had funded botany in South Africa, amongst many other initiatives around the world, at various institutions. And long story short, the head of Mellon Africa had a passion for conservation, had a passion for, and they were already funding OTS in Costa Rica, and they cooked up this idea that we should run undergraduate programs in the Kruger National Park, which is how we found ourselves here. Most of our staff were South African, and really from the early days, we've always had a sort of unrelenting focus on being useful and relevant in a local context. But so we started in 2004, but by 2008-09, we felt that we could be doing a lot more for human capital development in South Africa. At the time, OTS didn't necessarily have the funding, so the Nsasani Trust was established to focus primarily on South Africans whilst OTS and our relationship with, and we felt that it was best to actually streamline everything and make sure that as the 3 partner institutions, we streamlined our processes and really focused on making sure that we were all aligned. And it's just really grown from there. And with the building of this field station that you see behind Don, we really met our last of the initial obligations around our presence in the Kruger National Park. So it's been an evolution of ideas, but really just thinking about OTS and the other partners, not only focusing on education, but also long-term research and social justice, opening up the opportunities for a much broader audience than would have been served 20, 30 years ago in South Africa.
Thanks for sharing that. Did that answer your question, Virginia? Do you want to follow up?
It did. And I think I'm connected with Donovan separately, so I may end up talking with them in a little more detail about that.
Terrific. Okay, well, we're out of time. This hour went quickly. I wanted to I put a note in the chats that the International Committee, the OBFS International Committee, meets the first Friday of every month, and we welcome new members. So please feel free to share your email and name if you want me to add you to our list. We also send out notices on the listserv sometimes. We do have the matching program that's getting started again next month in December, where you can put together a proposal to work with other field stations, and we support that process. So look for details on that coming out on the listserv as well. And this is an opportunity to collaborate and start new collaborations, or to find an idea that you've been thinking about in the back of your mind for a while. Jennifer G, it just got, I can see you now, Jen. She's on that committee for the matching program. So we'll be reaching out about that activity. Also, I also wanted to give a quick plug to the OBFS survey that's going around. If you all have not already, I just put the link to the survey in the chat, so you could quickly click on that if you want to start filling that out. We're surveying all field stations, members and non-members, to learn more about the field station community. So those are my quick OBFS logistical details and updates. Any questions from anyone or comments? Okay, I want to give a thank you to Donovan. This was super interesting, and I've got even more follow-up questions from permitting to research priorities, et cetera. So the conversation hopefully will continue for many of us. It looks like Virginia also has reached out.
Thanks for putting this together, Rhonda. It was great.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rhonda.
My pleasure, and thrilled that we could all come together. We had 28 people on the call when everyone was here, so we got a good turnout today. So thank you, Donovan, for the topic, and for all the places this can take us in terms of connecting you with other national park field stations. Great seeing everyone, and hopefully we can connect either through the International Committee or through OBFS activities generally.
One suggestion, it might be worth at least sending out a roster of the participants for the presentation to all of the participants in the presentation, just so we know who we are, and it just enhances the networking. You know,
Philippe, that's why I've got the list of names, but not everyone's Zoom name is helpful for that. So I'm doing my best to send something like that out, and I'll follow up with everyone.
And everybody should send you their email address.
Yes, well, please do in the chat. That would be a big help. I've got names, and I will try to find who I can. But thank you for that suggestion. Much appreciated. Okay, well, I thank everyone for their time today. And the next, like I said, meeting for the International Committee is the first Friday of December. Bye, Jason. Bye, Jen.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Yeah, take care, everybody.
Hi, Sophia.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
Nice to see you.
to
Thanks
everyone.
for everything.
No problem. Sophia, you're going to get an email. So I lost. Oh, you're still there. You're moving around as people.
I'm here.
There's going to be a virtual Latin America conference, and we're sending out those invitations soon. So we'll be working on that, and Donovan will talk about the Europe Africa conference soon, hopefully. So some other opportunities coming to international field stations.
Yeah, so email. Sorry, I'll respond to it now with the dates.
No worries. No worries.
The dates sound good there.
Okay. well, a few more details that I'll fill you in on email. Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Thanks,
Good to
everybody.
see you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you
Thanks,
too.
guys.
Take care.
Ciao.